Welcome to the Albuquerque Journal's Tech Outlook podcast. CNM is truly one college with infinite possibilities in tech and data sciences. CNM offers programs where everyone can learn about software, apps, or how to build websites. You can also choose from AI programs and machine learning, the Internet of Things, and so much more. CNM, one college, infinite possibilities, and the proud sponsor of the Tech Outlook podcasts.
Hi, welcome back to Tech Outlook. I'm Ryan Botel with the Albuquerque Journal, and our guest today is Doug Campbell. And Doug is a Albuquerque native who has a lot of experience in the tech startup world that he's going to talk to us about. So, Doug, to start off, can you just introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about you?
Yeah, happy to do so. So, first of all, Ryan, thanks for having me. I'm an Albuquerque native. Grew up here. Typical Albuquerque question is, where'd you go to high school? I went to a combination of Albuquerque and Cibola, but graduated from Cibola in 91. In the 90s, I was actually an Albuquerque-based professional mountain bike racer. Did that while I was going to college, so technically I was a student athlete. In college, went to UNM, got 2 degrees, technically both from civil engineering, but when I went into my master's program, I pivoted into aerospace, and that kind of launched me into the tech startup world, because when I graduated in 2002, took a job up in the Denver Front Range area, and stayed there for about 20 years. So about half that time worked for others, and then in 2011 decided to strike out on my own.
Okay.
And then ultimately did 2 startups, complete soup to nuts. Soup to nuts meaning, founding, blank sheet of paper, all the way through full exit.
Okay. And what were these companies that you took public?
Yeah. So 2 companies. First one was a company called Rocore. That was based in, or it actually is still based in Longmont, Colorado. And that was a component supplier into the low Earth orbit satellite industry. That company was founded, I co-founded it. Myself and my co-founder established that in 2011, and it was established primarily because we saw there was a big change happening in the space satellite industry. Historically, old space was these large billion-dollar satellites operating in geostationary orbit. What we saw was that this low Earth orbit, so think Starlink, this low Earth orbit market was going to really boom. And so I called ourselves the picks and shovels of the low Earth orbit satellite industry, meaning we didn't make the payloads, we didn't make the bus structures, we made all the components that bolted onto the payload and bus structure. So think solar arrays for power, RF systems for communication, et cetera. So that's what we specialized in. In 2020, we sold that to a private equity-based company called Redwire, and they are now continuing, they're growing quite rapidly. Traded on the New York Stock Exchange. In parallel, I founded a company based on some research at the University of Colorado Boulder, think next generation batteries for electric vehicles. Ran that for a little over a decade, ultimately took it public on NASDAQ in 2021, and then stepped down as CEO in 2022. Okay. And that's shortly thereafter is when I boomeranged back to Albuquerque.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Now, what were the keys to your company's finding success?
Well, I kind of touched on it with Rocore, and that is kind of pulling out our quote-unquote crystal ball and making some bets on what we think, respective industries are going to pivot towards. So in the space one, we were accurate in predicting that this low Earth orbit satellite market, which is marked by small, low-cost satellites aggregated together. Things like that. We saw that as an opportunity that was going to happen. And in the case of solid power, it was just the advent of the electric vehicle market. Back in 2011, 2012, when we founded it, EVs were still sort of a concept. Yeah, there might have been a few Leafs on the road, but not that many. And then, of course, by the time we took the company public, the EV market was really, really booming in a big way.
Okay. So you found success. You were working in Colorado, but I think you told me that these were kind of global companies,
Correct.
International companies. So you could have been based anywhere. You just were based in the Front Range of Colorado.
Yeah, it's slightly different. I would say with Rocore, it was clearly advantageous to be in the Front Range area because it really is a center of excellence for aerospace industries. And frankly speaking, I think Albuquerque could could muscle their way to a seat at the table
Yeah.
in that industry, because the makings of it are already here between Sandia and Air Force Research Lab. So, it's a long-winded way of saying, yes, majority of our customers were outside of Colorado, a lot of them outside of the U.S. For example, Airbus OneWeb Satellites was one of our big customers based in France. But being able to hire talent locally was important. Solid Power was totally different. We did not have a single investor. We did not have a single customer inside the state of Colorado. So, yeah, in theory, it could have been located elsewhere. But Colorado was a good place to grow the businesses. But, yeah, I mean, we worked with the likes of Ford, BMW, SK over in South Korea, Solvay in Belgium, Umicore also in Belgium. So it was very much an international business.
Yeah. Now, you're going to have to explain this to me because I'm not super familiar, but like when you're talking about local talent, you said it, we have Sandia National Labs and AFRL. I would think that would mean that there's a lot of talent in Albuquerque. Am I missing something?
Yes and no. So absolutely, the talent at both AFRL and Sandia is noted. Sandia tends to skew more R&D. AFRL, while they're much more applied, they tend to have more program manager experience. Whereas really what you're looking for are engineers who have been through multiple design rounds, in space qualified system, and technicians who are know how to handle and assemble spaceflight qualified hardware. Those guys are worth their weight. Guys and gals are worth their weight in gold. So having that talent pool kind of around you, there's an element of it here in Albuquerque, but honestly, where I think we could be stronger is more on the private industry side of things. So, Denver's got Lockheed Martin just down the street building all kinds of satellites. You've got Ball Aerospace building all kinds of large systems, and the list goes kind of on and on. Yes, we have those types of companies here, but they tend to do more on-site support contractor work, and that's quite a bit different.
Okay. Because those are also public entities, right? When we're talking about
Publicly
Sandia,
traded?
Like a government.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying.
That type of public.
Sorry about that.
Those are like government entities, whereas up in elsewhere you found private industries
Correct.
in this same aerospace field. That just creates a little bit different ecosystem.
It does. It does indeed.
Okay. Now you pivoted after your career up in based at Colorado, you pivoted back to Albuquerque.
Boomeranged
Back to
I believe that's the
Albuquerque.
technical word.
Okay. This is Tech Outlook, so we'll keep the tech.
Exactly.
Why do you do that?
This is my hometown. I love New Mexico. I had, not to say that I didn't enjoy my time on the Front Range, but that's not my home. And not going to lie, it also got really crowded, especially in COVID. But I found myself in an interesting situation where I didn't necessarily need to continue to work. Obviously, I'd stepped down from my last position, and I was ready to come back. And I was ready to come back specifically in terms of giving back to this community and seeing what I can do, not only in the tech startup world, but also, I'm heavily involved at the University of New Mexico, and just to try to help this community in areas that I actually bring something to the table.
And bring something to the table, and as you've been there, done that with a tech startup.
Correct.
And you said there's a community of that here in Albuquerque,
there is.
But it's not super large.
It is not.
Okay.
It is not. And that's one thing that I've concluded here is that what is special about this place is there's no shortage of R&D. So there's no shortage of great ideas. There's no shortage of great techs between the likes of Sandia, Lanel, University of New Mexico, Air Force Research Lab, New Mexico Tech down the road. There's a lot of R&D happening in this area. But the challenge is that there is not a large ecosystem of seasoned entrepreneurs with catcher's mitt on waiting to catch that R&D and turn it into commercially viable products and rapid high-growth businesses. And that is what I've zeroed in on here in the community is how do we fix that?
Mm-hmm. And what does that entrepreneur need? Is it venture capital dollars, private investors, firms? What is the
sort of
secret?
all of the above. So it's capital, so access to capital from angel investors, VCs, access to mentors. So people like me who've actually been there, done that, who've experienced, challenges in fundraising, challenges in running companies, and challenges in dealing with personnel, and so on and so forth. And then just others, examples, good examples around you. I mean, that's what an ecosystem is. Wow, look at what so-and-so did. Look at what this company did. I want to do the same thing. That I think is where we're still subcritical here in New Mexico.
Okay. And maybe just to take a little step back, can you just kind of give us a broad overview of what that venture capital world that you need and even just some of the math? Like I've heard, 10x, 3x, just kind of the math that a venture capital investor would kind of do in their head.
Sure. So I'll kind of give you the generic kind of definition of venture capital. So the way venture capital works is I raise money from limited partners. So, hey, look at me. I'm really experienced. I'm going to raise a fund. LPs give money into that fund. And then I go around and I look for startups to invest in. And if I like what I see, so you and I come to an agreement, you've got a startup, we'll agree on an amount, we'll agree on a valuation. It's not unlike Shark Tank, although it doesn't happen that quickly.
Yeah, sure.
And then, of course, once we sign a term sheet, I'm on what's called your capitalization table. So I'm quite literally a shareholder, and sometimes I might even get involved in governance, meaning I take a board seat. And then what I'll do in my fund is I'll make a lot of those bets. I'll make, 30, 40, 50, maybe up to 100 bets, depending on the size of the fund. And then what I'm relying on, and you sort of use this 10 number, 1 out of 10 number, is generally speaking in the venture world, you tend to think of, if I make 10 investments, 9 of those investments are either going to go completely belly up or going to break even. And that's not very exciting. But one of those is going to take off. One of those is hopefully going to be a unicorn and is going to provide the returns on the fund. That's kind of how venture works. And generally speaking, the way you invest is you invest in multiple rounds. So you place 10 bets, and then you wait for the winners, and then you double down on those winners, and then kind of, this is going to sound kind of harsh, but then you sort of ignore the losers.
Yeah. I mean, you literally called them bets.
They are bets.
They are
bets. I mean, it's managed risk. So you do your diligence, both in the tech, both in the people, both in the market and the space, to the best of your ability. But you are certainly taking risk. It's much higher risk than, hey, I've got a purchase order in hand, I'm ready to go. That's not venture. That's go to the bank and get a loan.
Okay. So, and is it as simple as there are other communities that have just a lot more bettors in the casino than Albuquerque does?
Absolutely, and I'll use the Denver Boulder area as a model. When I first started attempting, interfacing with the venture community in sort of 2011, 2012 for my startups, with the exception of bio and pharma, because kind of the Boulder County has always been very, very strong in that arena. It was hard. We were considered flyover country back then. It was pretty much left coast, right coast. That's where the money is. In real time, I watched that change. In the decade that I interfaced with the venture community, I watched that change. I watched how that ecosystem for quote-unquote hard tech, meaning hardware, not social media, pets.com meets Facebook kind of stuff, but I mean hard tech, aerospace components, batteries for electric vehicles. It doesn't get any harder than batteries for electric vehicles. There, over time, it was very, very strong and receptive appetite to investing in that ecosystem. I never had an investor from Colorado. It was always outside money coming in. So I watched that happen in real time, and I would love to replicate that here in Albuquerque. We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
So that's interesting. That strategy is not necessarily more investors in Albuquerque, but just more investor money coming into Albuquerque.
Yeah, certainly having New Mexico-based investors is great because they're going to be much more adept at doing early stage investing. We call that seed stage investing in the business. But if an ecosystem's going to grow, it's got to attract outside money for follow-on investment rounds, your Series A, your Series Bs. And what I'd like to see is non-New Mexico-based VCs taking lead investor roles at that Series A and Series B stage for New Mexico companies.
And that's one of the reasons why you boomeranged back here, was to build up that environment. What holds New Mexico back just in the time that you've been doing this? How would you just kind of assess the ecosystem that we're talking about?
Well, like I said, lack of experienced and trained, been there, done that, tech startup entrepreneurs. The challenge that a lot of companies here face in New Mexico is they can raise a few $1 million early on, and then once they go towards the big bucks, your Series A's, your Series B's, they have a tendency to be drug out of state. It could be that their investors want them. They want them to be in more burgeoning areas. It could be that because of the lack of kind of been there, done there entrepreneurial folks, the companies end up having to recruit out of state for CEOs, COOs, CFOs. And guess what? If they don't end up moving to New Mexico, guess what's going to happen to that company?
The company's
generally going to move to where they are. And that's the kind of problem statement that I'm kind of focused in on right now is how do we fix that?
Yeah. And what do you think? I mean, are these social issues? Is this education? Is it crime? Is it weather? Seems like it would be a
weather's
positive.
Great. Outdoor access to outdoor is great. I think in terms of just general lifestyle, the expense, we're very cost competitive, especially with our surrounding states. But you mentioned it. Crime and poorly performing public school system is a challenge. I mean, you try to recruit in execs. First thing they're going to do is look at our crime statistics and our the ranking of our schools, and they're going to be they're going to have a oh boy, what's going on there? That's going to be a turnoff. So. I don't necessarily bring anything to the table when it comes to crime and things like that, other than as I slowly get the ear of legislators, kind of beat that drum. Guys, we really got to fix this. This is going to continue to be an anchor around the neck of this state and this city if we don't fix it. But beyond that, I think there's not a community, a robust community of a startup ecosystem, a collection of venture capitalists, a large collection, and experienced entrepreneurs. We don't lack that. So myself as a New Mexican, having boomeranged back here, I'm trying to figure out how can I export myself, because I'm only one individual, but I have a certain skill set that is very helpful and very useful to others. And so with my role in the venture community, with my role in the various things that I'm doing at the University of New Mexico, I'm trying to figure out a way, how did I marry the two such that I can export my skill set to local folks here.
Okay. And when you talked about the local talent pool here, you did say you need the executives and the highly trained people. You also need technicians. And we are hearing a lot out of like CNM, the community college. It does seem like they're trying to create systems to get highly trained, qualified, more technical people.
Absolutely. And I love what CNM's doing. I think CNM's a great institution.
Yeah. And then what, from the UNM side, what are you trying to work on to do that type of work that we were talking about?
To put it real simple, to make startups and spin-outs sexy.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to do. So, I'm very close with President Stokes. I'm very close with the relatively new Dean of Engineering, Donna Riley. We all speak the same language. When I talk about, let's, not unlike, what Stanford did many, many decades ago and what MIT did many, many decades ago, which is start to think about, no kidding, look around, what tech here could actually go into commercially viable products, and you, faculty, you, students, you, postdocs, is that a role you want to have? And make that part of the fabric of the culture at the university. That's what I think we need to do, and that's what I'm endeavoring to do.
Are you saying it's like a university can take on a more entrepreneurial culture as opposed to just educating students? Okay.
Yes, I would argue it should.
Yeah. Okay. And why is that? You've mentioned some examples that some universities have been there and done that.
Yeah, I think it just hasn't, the tide hasn't hit here in New Mexico just yet. And by the way, it's not to say that there aren't, some good spin-outs. I've seen some in the last year or two, but I can count them on my one or two of my hands.
Yeah.
No doubt, I think you could walk the halls at UNM and even at Sandia, and there's no shortage of startups.
Okay.
Tech that you could bundle a startup around. Yeah. And so coming up with a system with which we can identify those, foster those, mentor, encourage folks that, especially like new grads who, hey, maybe they don't want to go into the public sector. Hey, maybe I don't want to go into a large corporation like Intel. I want to do a startup because I think that's fun. I want to encourage that, and I want to establish that as a viable option for New Mexicans.
Okay, and we do have success stories in that state, in our state, in that world. Have we had like the 10X, the really big win?
I've been told we have.
Okay,
I don't know. Me being back only 18 months, I don't know if I'm the expert in that arena, but I am aware of a few like legitimate unicorns. So unicorn in our business is a startup that eventually achieves a $1 billion valuation. That's something that I did up in Colorado, and is something I'd like to see more of. I mean, I'd like to see. I'm convinced we have the ability to be turning out unicorns with a reasonable degree of cadence here in New Mexico. We just need the ecosystem around it.
Okay. Well, that's fascinating. It's been a fascinating conversation. How's your mountain bike going these days?
It's going awesome. So I had a little bit of a setback in the spring, broke my collarbone. Don't ask me how. We'll just leave that unsaid. But I'm back to normal. I'm not crash proof yet, but I am pretty much back to riding full throttle, starting to get back into racing. Did a fun little race a few weeks ago in Santa Fe. And then I'll hit my version of the circuit beginning in about a month up in Breckenridge, Colorado.
Okay. And I mean, that's not necessarily something to joke about. Outdoor recreation is a big economic driver in our state. And it's also something, when you mention Boulder, I'm thinking about Salt Lake City, Boise. Those are places where the outdoor recreation scene
They wear it on their sleeve.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think we do pretty well here.
Yeah.
So I don't at all want to be critical of that. I think we do a pretty decent job. I am getting involved at nothing public yet, but my passion definitely is trail advocacy and anything that can get folks outside, especially kids, anything that can get kids outside, because I certainly credit mountain biking to sort of getting me sort of back on the rails, if you will. And I think, non-traditional athletics is certainly a viable option for, certain population of kiddos here in the state.
Yeah. Well, Doug, thanks again for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. We look forward to hearing more about the work that you're doing in our state.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thank you.
Yep.
You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription or go to www.abqjournal.com/subscribe/abqpods and enter promo code ABQpods. This gets you a digital subscription to the newspaper for $3 a week, normally charged monthly at $12. That's a savings of $9. Thank you for joining us, and remember to read, hear, and watch.